When did adolescence get so cringy? Adolescence is awkward. Your body is changing, your responsibilities are growing, and every social interaction feels like it could be the end of the world as you know it. While these coming-of-age narratives have been explored in the media for centuries now, in recent years, animated films have really leaned into the awkwardness, maybe a little too hard, with dozens of different characters exhibiting a similar brand of cringe that we're supposed to find cute. Now don't get me wrong, when done right, these sorts of stories can be incredibly powerful, but in a lot of modern films, the characters' personalities are more of a punchline than they are an active part of the story. Instead of struggling to find their footing because of their eccentricities, they're grade A students, have a group of ride or die besties, super cool magical powers, and of course, the ability to save the world. They're somehow too quirky to function, and yet they're still perfect just the way they are. Awkwardness has become aspirational, and I can't help but wonder if that sort of message is actually beneficial. There was once a time when coming-of-age stories actually focused on personal growth. Your flaws were acknowledged, your actions had consequences, and while you didn't need to become a perfect person, you did need to become a better one. Just think about Hercules, Coraline, Victor, Violet, or Lewis. They're all positioned as outsiders, and their unusual behaviors actually impact the narrative in a meaningful way. Hercules' strength causes problems throughout his adolescence, eventually influencing his decision to become a hero. Coraline's curiosity and hard-headedness puts her at odds with her parents, and her inability to accept any wrongdoing makes her an easy target for the other mother. Victor is such a coward that he's unable to talk himself out of marriage to a literal corpse. Violet is so shy that she doesn't even need her power to be invisible. And Lewis is so utterly focused on a single goal that it makes him lose sight of everything else. Do you see the pattern here? The characters have a personality trait that causes a problem, and it's through fixing that problem that they're able to grow and become a better person. And most notably, their personalities and issues aren't interchangeable. Modern animated films have taken a very different approach, with a character's quirks no longer hindering them socially or emotionally, to the point that it almost feels as though the filmmakers are afraid of criticizing said behavior. Ironically, even though these characters are presented as misfits who can't fit in, they're all eerily similar, effectively stripping them of any individuality the film claims to celebrate. If you watched my video about adorkable Disney characters, then you already know what to look for, but if not, it's pretty easy to spot. With these sorts of characters breaking the fourth wall, making random pop culture references, having some kind of nervous tic, a weird interest that nobody else understands, being unbelievably chatty, and of course, devolving into self-deprecating humor. But does any of this change how people interact with them? Of course not. Now I already know I'm going to get comments saying, well, it must be nice to not be able to relate, but I was the weird kid growing up. That's why I find these depictions so disingenuous. If you're going to insist on making your characters socially awkward, then 1, make it make sense, and 2, have it serve a purpose. And the thing is, in the past we've seen it done. Lilo and Stitch perfectly captures just how alienating it can be to be a kid who doesn't fit in. Because of her unconventional upbringing, Lilo has developed some truly strange behaviors, and while the audience finds these quirks charming, the film actually shows the fallout. Adults pity her, other kids hate her, and she almost gets taken away from her sister. Lilo knows that she's different, even expressing a desire to change when she doesn't really know how, and we all know how frustrating it can be to try your best and still not be enough. It's through meeting Stitch that she finds someone who truly understands and accepts her, and even though that relationship allows her to continue being weird, they acknowledge that it isn't going to make her universally loved. They also just do a great job of setting up why Lilo is so weird, as it's a reflection of her grief and loneliness instead of a random personality trait thrown in for laughs. Disney actually used to be really good at that sort of awkward representation, as seen in The Little Mermaid 2. Although the film has simply flipped the dynamics in the original film, with Melody wanting to explore the ocean while Ariel forbids it, their respective isolations have resulted in very different personalities. Where Ariel was brave and determined from the beginning, Melody is more introverted and sensitive. Her inability to fit in with others her age leads her to question her entire identity, and it's only through trying something new and making mistakes that she's able to become a better version of herself. In Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Flint Lockwood and Sam Sparks are another great example of social awkwardness impacting a character's life and decisions well into adulthood. Both were nerdy kids with niche interests that were made fun of by their peers, but where they differed was their response to this ridicule. Sam reined in her true personality in an attempt to be more widely accepted, but the facade occasionally slips when she's around others, and it's through accepting this weirdness that she's able to help save the day. And we can see a clear shift in her personality at the beginning of the movie versus the end. Flint's failed experiments make him a pariah, even in his own home, and he's so desperate to be accepted and loved that he almost destroys the entire town. It's only through the consequences of his actions that he's able to acknowledge his mistakes, making him a better son, friend, and inventor. You can also look at Marlin and Dory from Finding Nemo, who have totally different personalities but can both misinterpret social cues. Marlin, who's pessimistic and anxious and just overall a downer, isn't able to connect with the rest of the parents at school. While Dory can be endearing, she's also incredibly frustrating. In both cases, they acknowledge their social shortcomings and make attempts to improve where they can. Neither expects the other to change, but they do so anyway, because it's the right thing. In more modern films, we're often presented with characters who are quirky for the sake of being quirky. In Wish, Asha can barely form a coherent sentence without making a funny face or cracking a joke, but simultaneously, she has 7 best friends, a close relationship with her family, and is in line to be the king's apprentice. How can you expect us to relate to a character who is so mediocre and yet so extraordinary? Or there's Raya and the Last Dragon, where Sisu is unbelievably naive and sassy, but Raya is framed as the problem, and she's the one who needs to become more fun and trusting, completely disregarding her traumas and experiences. In Turning Red, May describes herself as a, quote, mildly annoying young lady, a major weirdo, and an overachieving dork-narc. And yet, none of these things are ever portrayed as having a negative impact on her or the story.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
The actual sources of conflict are all external, like her mom's overbearing behavior, the red panda curse, and the impossible expectations she sets for herself. With the story's message being embrace your weirdness, they're essentially saying that there's nothing wrong with May's behavior. It's the people who aren't accepting of it that are the problem. K-pop Demon Hunters and Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken actually have a lot in common with Turning Red, like generational trauma and supernatural curses, but I think they pull off the cringe in a much more believable way. Ruby is shy, awkward, and desperate to fit in, but the film doesn't make that her superpower. Even though she wants to be normal, she still finds herself drawn to other misfits like Margot and Trevin and Bliss, because she sees in them what she can't accept about herself. The film doesn't glamorize her inability to communicate properly, instead treating it as a sign of deeper insecurity that actively causes problems, which is further emphasized by her interactions with Chelsea, who represents everything that she wants to be. As such, Ruby's story is not only about realizing that there are people who will truly accept her, but also discovering who she truly is. The characters in K-pop Demon Hunters are world-famous idols who play the part in public. They're glamorous, flawless, and totally composed, but behind closed doors, they're absolute weirdos. It works because the movie draws a clear boundary. This behavior is only safe in private. As a result, their unified awkwardness becomes a form of intimacy that humanizes them. It's not a generic shortcut to relatability. In so many of these modern animated films, the socially awkward kid already has a friend group that's just as weird as they are, but they always skip over how difficult it can be to actually find those like-minded people. That's why I really enjoyed the first Inside Out movie, as they actually acknowledged how terrifying it can feel to put yourself out there, and why that vulnerability and discomfort is sometimes necessary to move forward. Being socially awkward in real life can be lonely. And while I'm not saying that a movie about aliens or magic or demons needs to traumatize its viewers just for the sake of realism, there's also something comforting about knowing that you're not the only one who feels that way. The transition from childhood to adulthood is crucial, as it's the time in our lives when we learn the most about ourselves and others. We're changing physically, emotionally, psychologically, even spiritually. An important aspect of growing up is social learning, the process of learning how to interact with others through the observation of behavior and the consequences of actions. It's a messy but essential trial and error stage where kids realize that not everyone will respond the same way to what they say or do. Being different isn't a bad thing, and obviously I'm not advocating for every socially awkward character to be bullied and ridiculed, but glossing over the harsh realities of that sort of thing isn't the right move either. Not everybody is going to find your cringe cute, but it's okay if being yourself doesn't work out right away. That's part of growing up, something that we seem to have forgotten. Movies are a reflection of the time they're made in, and I don't think it's a coincidence that so many modern animated characters act like they've never had a real conversation in their life. Nowadays, you can't just call someone on the phone, you text. You can't walk up to a stranger you think is cute, you swipe right. And the idea of community has disintegrated to the point that your neighbor is more likely to point a gun at you than give you a cup of sugar. Now, there are hundreds of things that have factored into this decline. Social media, the pandemic, general burnout, but I think one of the biggest ones is that people simply don't want to take accountability anymore. It's not you, it's them. You're not weird, they're just judgmental. You don't need to change, the world does. And that's exactly what these characters represent, a fantasy. A world where you don't need social skills to be loved and successful. And while I understand the comfort in that message, I also think it's kind of patronizing. Not every character needs to be polished or perfect, but they do need to feel real. And being able to look at yourself, acknowledge your flaws, and try to do better, that's not a punishment. It's a challenge to rise to, which is much more rewarding than getting a gold star for just showing up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!